Hello and welcome to the Thursday, or as we like to call it around here, the Friday Eve edition of the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Ahlstrand. Hope you're having a fantastic day. Another bright blue sky and sunshine and sunny and warm. Temperatures 27 degrees today with the humidity factored in. That's not a bad weather day to start back to school, is it? It's going to cool off tomorrow, according to our weather specialist, Alistair Alders, says we'll see temperatures start to fall a little bit on Friday, and then the good news in the weekend forecast is that there is some shower activity that's starting to stir up in the region. We could see showers late on Saturday and into Sunday, but I will throw a large caveat on that. It's still a couple of days off, and with the weather patterns that we've been experiencing this year, who the heck knows? But it is a beautiful day, and I know we talked about this yesterday. That first day, I drove into work this morning, and I saw a lot of parents on the sidewalks with their kids, walking them to school for that first day of class, and with the new book bag and the new clothes and everything else, and parents looking like parents do on the first day of school. One of two ways, right? Either very excited or a little freaked out. We have a school bus stop that in front of my building. And sometimes I feel like I'm a little bit of a weirdo spying out my windows when these things show up. But the bus shows up. I'm looking out. I'm sitting on my deck. I see the bus, and you can see the veteran parents with their kids. It's like, yeah, okay, pat on the head, get on the bus, boot in the backside, on you go. And then the first time parents with the tears and everything else, right? So it's a traumatizing time. It really is. And no, I don't sit there and watch for the school bus. I just happen to see it. But it's an interesting observation. HRCE on its website says that it will welcome 60,000 students back to classrooms this year. 60,000 students. Think about that for a minute. That's a large cohort of students in the elementary system and the high school system, of course. I checked social media. In fact, I was checking it as we were coming in onto the air here, and it looks like, and I don't want to jinx anything, but it looks like everything went as planned. But I'm sure that if it didn't, that we will hear about it in the days and hours and weeks ahead. It seems that there's always a few problems with busing and such and so forth, and I hope that doesn't happen this year. But we'll keep our ear to the ground to see if anything, or if we can pass along any information to you. Moving on, the NFL, the National Football League, starts tonight. Can you believe it? It's already here. The Philadelphia Eagles will raise their Super Bowl banner tonight as they get ready to kick off the season on the Thursday night game. I think it's a 9 o'clock start or a 9:30 start here in Atlantic, Canada. And how about Felix Auger-Aliassime? I know tennis isn't a one of the top four, we'll say, in our part of the world, but that's pretty good for a Canadian to be advancing to the semifinal at the U.S. Open. We seem, as Canadian tennis players, seem to do really well at that tournament. For whatever reason it is, we've seen some Canadians advance to the finals, some win, some get to the semis in doubles. We saw Annie Fernandez get to the semifinal with Venus Williams, who's a fairly good tennis player, right? Even though she's 45, she's still playing. Good for her. But having Felix Auger-Aliassime, easy for me to say, into the semifinal is a boon for Canadian tennis. Now, we will, of course, be cheering as hard as we can cheer for him, but he has a rather large task in front of him. He's got to play Jannik Sinner today, who I think, and I stand to be corrected, but I think he's only lost like one match this year. So he's on fire. He is the cream of the crop, but we will unite behind Felix and hope that he can pull off the upset and advance to the U.S. Open final. Wouldn't that be something? Blue Jays are off tonight. Did you watch that yesterday? I hope you listened to it here on 95.7. My goodness. The cardiac kids, are they not? They get down, and then they manage to find that long, deep home run ball, and and then they get back into games. They've been doing it all season. If you heard our sportscast today, Simon, our sports guy, not the biggest fan of the Blue Jays bullpen at this point, but managed to pull it off. Now this day off, and then to Yankee Stadium to face the Yankees. And boy, what a series, right? This is a huge series. They all get huge from here till the end of the season. But the Yankees 3.5 games back right now in the American League East. So the Jays can open up a significant lead imagine if they were able to sweep the Yankees. Wouldn't that be something? But to win the series is the important part here, to build on that lead as we watch the race in the American League East. Don't forget, you can catch all of the games live right here this weekend on 95.7 News Radio. So if you're maybe rolling up the gardens, it might be a little early for that. But if you're rolling up the gardens, you're outside doing some yard work, or you're out enjoying some of the weather before the rain rolls in Saturday, and you're sitting on your deck, bring the radio with you. You can listen to the Jays here, and it will be fantastic. Now, if you were listening to the news today, you heard something we kind of broached a little bit yesterday here on the program. Two Halifax residents say the city's mayor, that's Andy Fillmore, is being investigated for an alleged breach of the municipal code of conduct rules. The residents say Andy Fillmore made misleading comments when he told the CBC earlier this summer that the chief administrative officer holds the real power at City Hall. Peter Linfield says he filed a complaint because Fillmore either doesn't, and this is from the Canadian Press, he either doesn't understand municipal politics or is intentionally misleading the public while pushing for stronger mayoral powers. Fillmore, of course, has criticized the city's weak mayor powers. We've talked to him about that on this program, as the Nova Scotia government is considering giving mayors in the province a stronger voice on the councils. Now, the Canadian Press looked at the emails from Linfield and another complainant, Jillian Banfield, from a city consultant confirming that their complaints have merit and that the results, as a result, Fillmore is under investigation. We've reached out to all parties involved here to try and get them to join the program, and we will continue to do so, but have not yet been successful at this point. As Vanessa looks at me like, what? We did that? No, we did that, of course. That's something I'm very interested in your thoughts on. I didn't hear the interview on the CBC, so I'm at a bit of a loss. But Mayor Fillmore saying that the CAO has more power than him is, of course, not accurate. The CAO works for regional council. Council doesn't work for the CAO. But if you've been listening to this show or previous iterations of this show, I think as far back as probably Jordy Morgan, I know for sure Rick Howe, and I know for sure Todd Veinotte have all said that the CAO has an awful lot of power over matters here in HRM. The CAO has the ability to spend money under a certain amount, discretionary spending. If you remember back a year or so ago, there was discussion about the armored vehicle for HRP being purchased by the municipality before it went to council. The CAO might have been a little longer than a year ago, but didn't go before council. The CAO making the purchase. I don't know, and I will not speak for the mayor, but I don't know if that's where he was going at with this. But if he did, in fact, say that the CAO that he works for the CAO, that is false, and that is misleading. I'm curious, how big a deal is this for you? Is this something that should be investigated? Is this something that and as I understand it, and again, I stand to be corrected, but as I understand it, their investigation is launched. We know that, but then this will go to council, and council will go behind closed doors, and then they will debate this and figure out what the appropriate penalty will be for this, and then it will be made public. But until then, we really don't know, and we really won't know what was being said behind closed doors. We saw a code of conduct issue a couple of councils ago. I believe it was Councillor Whitman from District 13 that had a complaint filed against them, and I think there have been others since. But my question to you is a pretty simple one on this one. Is this something that should be investigated? Is this something that the mayor needs to be held to account on saying, or is this just feel like a little bit of posturing, for lack of a better term? That's something we're going to ask you when we open up the open line today. That's going to happen at 11 o'clock here on the program. Hope you have some time to spend with us and join us and engage in the conversation. We're going to focus today a little bit on back to school. It is a big deal, not only at the elementary level, but also at the post-secondary level. As we know, the ongoing labor dispute continues at Dalhousie. I know there are some first-year students that are scratching their heads this time around because they have a course load, they have a timetable, and some classes are on and some classes are off. But back to school is a big deal, not just for parents, but for the community, because we see an influx of students and so on and so forth. So we're going to focus today, part of our program, on back to school and some of the things that are happening in the municipality. With regards to maybe, police involvement. We know that homecoming's coming, right? We know that homecoming thing has been a thing in the South End as of late. So we're going to connect up with HRP to talk about that. New report showing Nova Scotia has some of, if not the highest child poverty rates in the country. Conversation with the CEO of Children's First Canada will be there. Also, if you haven't seen the news today, it looks like the wait list for affordable housing in Nova Scotia has grown past, I think the number is 8,000 now. And that and the power rates, it's looking tough for renters, particularly those that are in the lower income brackets. A conversation with the leader of Nova Scotia's official opposition, Claudia Chender. That's all part of the show today. And the open hour, of course. So I hope you can stick around. I hope you are having a fantastic day. And we're going to take our first break and get right back at it. You're listening to The Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. Happy Thursday. We're back in a minute. All right, welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. Every once in a while, we like to connect up with our friends down at Halifax Regional Police to see what's going on in the community. And, of course, today is a big day for everybody as we head back to school. And, of course, the university students are here. And that is a bit of a unique situation this year with the ongoing labor dispute at Dalhousie. But there are still other universities here, and the students are here for Dal waiting to go to class. And what does this all mean from a policing perspective? So we went right to the person in the know, and we haven't spoken to Martin Cromwell for some time here on the program, and we welcome him into the studio today. Constable Cromwell, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Always a pleasure to be here, and always appreciate the invite.
All right, so it is that time of year. We're back to school. Today is a big day, obviously, for the kids on the road, and I think so far everything's gone kind of according to plan.
Yes.
From an HRP perspective, when like a day like today happens, do things change? Do you do anything different? Do you focus on any specific areas?
Well, from the, I guess, like elementary, junior high sort of aspect, we want to make sure that the drop off is going as smoothly and safely as possible. That's mainly our focus for, I guess, those years of school.
Right.
In terms of universities, we've had additional patrols to ensure the safety for both the residents and the returning students.
So an increased police presence there just to make sure everybody kind of is safe. Not necessarily you're going to go there and start throwing people in police cars. You're there to ensure that everybody has a good time.
Definitely, yeah. Our purpose isn't to prevent anyone from having fun. We've all been there. Everyone enjoys, letting off a little steam. But yes, our additional patrols are there for the month of September in the university area, this south end of Halifax, to ensure overall public safety, again, for both the residents and the students, and to maintain or to address any quality of life issues, which would include public intoxication, mischief, property damage, noise complaints especially.
So, Martin, when we start to get in the planning stages of this, do you involve the university in these discussions? Do the universities have a say in what's going on? How does that all work out? Do they ask for this additional police presence?
Well, we don't necessarily work with them. Like, there's no shared plan, so to speak. Right. But we are in communication with the universities and along the way. So to make sure that if anything does happen on their campus and they need our assistance, we have that open line of communication that we can reach each other fairly quickly and efficiently.
We have seen incidents in the recent years surrounding the homecoming event, obviously, in the south end of Halifax. Obviously, that is on something that's on HRP's radar.
Yes. Our additional patrols will be focusing in the south end around the university areas, Dalhousie, St. Mary's, King's. They will be, again, running for the whole month of September in the evenings, and we'll just be out and about, highly visible, highly approachable. We did have our officers out prior to the return of students, providing some educational pieces, speaking with the residents and the students, providing a pamphlet with some information, again, to help keep everyone safe, to clear up any questions, concerns, information on how to reach us. So that was our educational piece, and now that we are going to be out doing those patrols, that will still be a little bit of education, but more of the enforcement at that point in time.
Right. Your previous life before communications, you were a community officer. So
yes.
You're very familiar with how the inner workings are within communities. How important is that relationship and that communication between students, landlords, people who live in that area, and police?
Well, I think it's extremely important. It gives everyone, I feel, a sense of they know what's going on, for lack of a better word. Like they know what to expect. They know how to reach us. There's no like, what do we do here? What do we do for this? Those questions are hopefully addressed by our officers, our community officers, leading up to this time of year. So,
Martin, what kind of acts, and I don't even know if you can answer this, what kind of acts are not allowed? I know that you were mentioning public intoxication, but I would imagine officers on patrol also keeping an outlook for public consumption and those kind of things.
Yes, all of the above. I think the main three that are concerns any time of year, but specifically this time of year in the South End with all the partying, would be the noise complaints, the public intoxication, as you mentioned, and the property damage.
So as a resident of the South End, if I have a complaint, now there are two ways that we can reach out to police, right? There's the more serious stuff where, that's a 911 call, and there's the administration call. Where should I look to which number should I use in what situation?
Well, 911, if you feel there's an imminent threat of danger or imminent issue, safety, danger, and you need an officer immediately to come to you, to come to that scene, definitely call 911. If you don't necessarily need an officer but have some concerns, want to report something, you can use the non-emergency number. And then there's also 311 for any type of bylaw infraction, which we may be involved in during the course of that investigation.
So you maintain this increased presence in the South End for the month of September, but you don't go away, right? You're obviously going to still be down there.
Our officers will always be around all day, every day, all year round. And but yes, we do have our additional patrols to be highly visible throughout the month of September, and there'll be officers in marked patrol cars, on bike patrol. We'll be out and about everywhere.
Back to the younger kids. It's that time of year, and I'm putting myself into that cohort. Haven't seen the big yellow buses on the roads, and I know that it's a little bit late now. Kids should be in class by now, but there is going to be a drive home today. So maybe some school bus reminders, Martin. The safety measures that we take for school buses are super important.
Right. I think a key message would be if you see that big yellow school bus, be mindful of the flashing lights, and if the stop sign's out, just stop. Just simply stop. There's no reason to rush around that. It's so unsafe. Imagine your children being put in danger. You wouldn't want that.
Right.
So, yes, I think it's very important to note, to just stop for the school buses, respect what they're doing, take a moment. You're going to get home. Everyone's going to get home safely.
And there are reduced speed zones in very close to schools. That's also important to watch your speed when you're getting close to those areas where the kids are and the playgrounds and the drop-offs and
Definitely.
Those kind of
things. Have your head on a swivel. As soon as you're entering the school zone, because it's likely your regular route to and from work, you know where the school zones are, if you're going to be entering into them. Again, just be mindful, head on a swivel, watch for the kids, darting out. Just be very, very diligent.
And the last thing, and this isn't necessarily a student thing, this is an HRM-wide thing. I see your releases every month with regards to impaired driving, and to be quite honest, it always shocks me when I see it. Maybe it shouldn't, but this still happens in HRM. I think the message that at least gets relayed to me is that if you're drinking, don't drive, because looking at those stats, chances are you're going to get caught.
Absolutely. Our officers do checkpoints in various spots in the city. We're out on a regular basis enforcing impaired driving. And to the community out there, if there's a spot or an area in the city that you feel is a bad spot for that, or notice anything, by all means give us a call, and we can look at putting a checkpoint there for a brief time, or if you have any information, by all means call us. There's always the non-emergency number, or Crime Stoppers if you have any information about somebody driving impaired, and we'll do our best to look into that and prevent it as much as we can.
Martin, it's always a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
That is Constable Martin Cromwell from Halifax Regional Police. Back to school zones, school buses, and of course, fun and frivolity, maybe we can call it, down in the South End. Police down there to keep an eye on things, to make sure that everybody has a good time, including those that live down there, because sometimes it can get loud. So just everybody have fun, but let's remember that we're all members of the community, and let's, as I like to say at the end of the show, just be kind to one another, right? We're going to stop and take another break. When we come back, new report showing Nova Scotia has the highest child poverty rate in the country. The CEO and founder of Children First Canada, Sarah Austin, will be your guest. You're listening to The Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. Back in minutes. All right, welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. Hope you're having a fantastic Thursday as we roll through the week. And as I mentioned off the top of the program today, and we're almost there. It's Friday Eve, and I know that it's a big day for everybody today as the bulk of students in HRCE go back to school, and we get back into those routines. I came across something in getting ready for back to school week this week, a little bit earlier this week. A new report shows that a vast majority of Canadian kids are bullied and don't feel supported at school. And part of that study looked at child poverty rates in Canada, and Nova Scotia saw one of the biggest, if not the biggest, increase of all of the provinces in child poverty rates this year. That's obviously is a concern to me, and I would imagine is a concern to many of you out there listening to the program today. Very pleased to welcome into the show on the phone, joining us from Children First Canada, founder and CEO Sarah Austin. Sarah, how are you?
Good morning, Dan. I'm great. Thanks. Thanks so much for having me.
I'm very glad that you had some time for us today. Let's begin with that number, that Nova Scotia number that kind of jumped off the page with regards to child poverty rates. Nova Scotia is seeing the biggest increase in child poverty rates in the country.
Yeah, it's really alarming to see so many of our kids being left behind. There had been some really positive progress around child poverty during the height of the pandemic, with federal and provincial governments stepping up with income supports and other measures to really help alleviate the pressures that Canadians, particularly families with young children, were facing at the time, and where we saw kids being lifted out of poverty. But with those supports being withdrawn, with the cost of living escalating so significantly, particularly for the cost of housing and food, families in Nova Scotia in particular are really suffering. We've seen a really drastic increase in child poverty, to the point that it really puts kids at grave risk. Those are kids who are going to school with empty tummies in the morning because they haven't had breakfast. They may not have had a lunch packed in their backpack, and so they're going to be struggling throughout the day. Those kids are, going to be having a difficult time paying attention in school. They're more likely to be misbehaving because they're just not feeling well, and they're really not set up for success. And at the end of the day, they may not be going to an after-school program, whether it's a hockey team or a dance lesson or a music class, and going home to an empty home where their parents, because their parents are working long shifts to put a roof over their head and food on the table. That's really quite a desperate situation for a young child that puts them in toxic stress, not only for that day, but impacts their body and their brain and how it's developing for years to come.
We know Nova Scotia has taken a step towards school lunch program. We saw an expansion of it this year, which helps that situation out a bit, but it doesn't deter the fact that kids are still coming to school hungry and are going home hungry.
That's right. It's the creation of the new National School Food Program and the expansion of Nova Scotia's program is a huge victory, and will make measurable progress in the lives of many, many children. But as you said, with kids in schools reopening right now, the proof is in the pudding. Is that money going to be flowing fast enough? Are school officials set up for success? Are they working with enough community partners to be able to really address the urgent needs? We know food banks and other supports within the community are desperately trying to keep up with demand. And we really need to look at the bigger picture of all of this. Why are so many of our kids struggling? How do we get to some of these root cause issues around the cost of living in particular, and really help parents to be able to do what they need to do to help their kids not only survive but thrive.
Now, I mentioned off the top this report looked at a bunch of different things, but many factors, including mental health, online exploitation, and racism, on the rise. Nova Scotia is seeing a big drop in the number of kids, I use kids broadly, 12 to 25, who reported that the very good or excellent mental health for between 2025 and to 2022. So obviously the pandemic fit in there a little bit, but that's a significant number.
Yeah, it is significant. We've seen a drop in Nova Scotia of children who previously reported their health as excellent or very good down to fair or poor. And that's something that is happening in Nova Scotia. It's happening. We're also seeing it in many other parts of the country, and it's indicative of a mental health crisis kids have been facing for many years. The crisis was looming before the pandemic happened, and it continues to escalate. We know that the IWK and many other organizations that are in Halifax and across Nova Scotia are working really hard to try and keep up with the demand. But I think it really shows that our kids are struggling. They haven't simply just bounced back from the pandemic, and these are not single issues. Mental health is fueled by child poverty, by child abuse, by racism, by climate change, and so many of the other struggles that we have highlighted in this report. These are complex issues. Kids are impacted on all fronts, and we really need to look at what we can do to help our kids really not just survive in life, but really get them to thriving and prospering.
Also included in this report, finding that almost 3/4 of youth between the age of 12 and 17 say they're being bullied. That's massive.
Yeah, it is. It is indeed. And for me as a mom, this one really stood out. I have a kid who just started high school this week. I chatted with him when I saw this. I said, "Buddy, is this really happening?" He said, "Yeah." I kind of shrugged and said, "Yeah, Mom. We know about Pink Shirt Day, which started in Nova Scotia, and all these efforts to try and stand up to bullying and to stamp it out. But in many ways, kids are talking about these issues, but they really don't adequately addressed. And from a child's perspective, what I'm hearing is that it's not that the teachers don't care and that they're not trying. They may reprimand a child. That child may get called down to the principal's office. But if the behavior continues day in and day out, week after week, month after month, it really leaves kids who are either witnessing or experiencing the bullying feeling really hopeless that it's never going to end. And it's not just happening in the classrooms; it's happening in the playgrounds, but even increasingly online. This year, the report showed that there was a rapid rise in online bullying that was happening, particularly for young people from Black, Indigenous, or other racialized backgrounds, young people from the 2S LGBTQ community who are also more vulnerable. So these issues, again, are just being fueled online in particular and really escalating in the lives of kids where they just feel like they don't have the tools to be able to address it adequately.
A political party here in Nova Scotia, Sarah, is going to propose a piece of legislation this fall when we get back to work at the legislature that would ban social media use for children under the age of 16. You mentioned cyberbullying. Do you think that having something like that on the books would help that number here?
Yeah, I think the topic of banning social media has certainly become a lightning rod. I think in many parts of the country and around the world, we've seen many jurisdictions take these drastic efforts. I think there's very mixed views amongst experts and amongst children and youth and parents about, is that the right way to go? There's a lot of young people I speak with who really want to have social media tools because it helps them to stay connected to the world, to get information, to stay connected to their peers. And there are many positive things that can come out of social media, but it's a total Wild West right now. There's very little regulation. And I think, what I hear from many people is that a need for better online regulation. There's pressure, particularly for the federal government, to step up and do their part. They had tabled two different bills, one from the Conservatives, one from the Liberals, earlier this spring for an online safety act for kids. They didn't cross the finish line before the election, and it really needs to be a top order of priority this fall as Parliament resumes.
Sarah, appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for speaking with me.
That is Sarah Austin, the founder and CEO of Children First Canada. Those numbers maybe shouldn't surprise me so much. I mean, bullying has been since there's been a schoolyard, right? Really, there have been. Not to suggest or condone it, but it has happened. But I often have conversations with parents, and now because of my age cohort, grandparents, about bullying these days, and it's a much more difficult place to navigate now than it was when I was a student, because we were still writing on stone tablets when I was a student. So we didn't have social media. We didn't have all of those other pressures. We didn't have all of the technology that's out there. 71, almost 3 out of 4 kids, 12 to 17, say that they've been bullied. That's incredible. We're stop to take another break here on the program, but when we return, some new information out today from the Nova Scotia New Democrats, the wait list in Nova Scotia for public housing. Over 8,000 people in June. That grew by 1,200 in just 8 months. A conversation with the leader of the NDP, Claudia Chender, when we come back. You're listening to The Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Allstrand. We're back in minutes. Welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Allstrand. We know that the housing affordability crisis continues in Nova Scotia. Some news this week I don't think is going to make that any better, and that is a proposed 8.3 whatever percent it is increase in electricity rates. Some new data today released by the NDP after a Freedom of Information request. Public housing waitlist is now over 8,000 people in June. It grew by 1,200 people in 8 months. Very pleased to welcome to the program the leader of the NDP in Nova Scotia, Claudia Chender. Claudia, happy back to school day.
Thanks, Dan. I think my 3 are still there since I dropped them off. Fingers crossed.
What does it look like in your household? Is it crazy as everybody else's is?
Well, as of today, I've got 3 in junior high, so we don't have that kind of mad scramble of tying people's shoes that we had in the early days. But, there's the school supplies and the jitters and the preparation, but I think everybody's ready for routine again.
Yeah, it's always that first day of jitters, and then it just gets back to normal, and it's just like, yeah, whatever, right?
That's right.
Claudia, this information shouldn't have to come from a Freedom of Information request. Why does the government bury this stuff when I think it should be public knowledge?
Well, you're absolutely right. And I think the reason that this government, which really likes to make announcements, doesn't announce this kind of thing is because it is really evidence that we have not seen action on the housing crisis. It's been a number of years now since the Houston government came in, and housing has skyrocketed, the cost of housing. Affordable housing is nearly impossible to find. And now we have more evidence. I think the fact that we're seeing this wait list for public housing explode is less about public housing and more about the fact that we just have no affordable housing in this city anymore. And that's because we haven't protected renters. We haven't done what the experts have told us to, have a tenancy enforcement branch, have some type of rent control that actually works for landlords and tenants, frankly, close the fixed term lease loopholes so that you're not renting for a year only at, $1,500 a month if you're lucky, and then the next year for $2,000 a month. This is what's happening. So our rents are skyrocketing and people have nowhere to go. And the worst part is half of the people on that list are seniors. And we're not taking care of our seniors. We're not making sure that they have places that they can afford to retire with dignity. And that should be a priority of this government.
Claudia, should the province get more into public housing? Should we be getting and putting more units out there to address this problem?
Well, I think we always need to have some public housing stock. We definitely need to have a lot more what we call non-market housing. So things like co-ops, nonprofits. We've got a lot of that. We have a long history of that in our province, actually, from one end to the other. But I think, the government has announced a number of public housing units. But in the meantime, the wait list has skyrocketed. So I think what we need right now are some solutions that are going to matter to the people on that list and to the tens of thousands of others who really are living month to month and having a hard time affording living in our province. And so that's making sure that people can stay in their home, protecting renters. All of that can happen, with the stroke of a pen tomorrow, and will make a meaningful difference in people's lives. In the meantime, as we build more housing supply, we certainly need to make sure that a portion of that supply is actually affordable for folks. And so that's real. We need more housing. We have a lot of people here. Anyone who's trying to get around our city knows that. But there is actually a lot the government could do right now that would make a difference and allow people to stay in their homes. And so, that's what we are going to continue to push this government to do. And that's what reports like this, sadly reveal. Actually
affordable is a term I hear a lot. And that number is different for every family, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely. And go ahead.
How would a government be able to handle that when we rely on the private sector essentially for housing, particularly in HRM, because without having somebody going on a case by case basis, A doesn't seem to equal B to me.
Well, I think that there's actually lots of ways. So as you say, affordability means different things to different people. So there's deeply affordable housing, things like, public housing, rent geared to income. That's obviously, we need some of that. But there's a whole swath of folks who go to work every day, who have kids in school, who are really, really finding it hard to pay their housing costs at the end of each month. And those are the folks we also need to be focused on. And the private sector is having a real building boom because the government has in some ways paved the way for that. So this is a government that has said that the answer to the housing crisis is to build more supply. They have incentivized the private sector. They've given them land. They've, opened up zoning. They are using public money to incentivize the private sector to build. So if we're doing that anyway, Dan, then let's make sure some of that build is accessible to, the families and the young folks and the seniors who need housing the most. Because unfortunately, a lot of the housing supply that's being produced is really unaffordable for the vast majority of Nova Scotians. So that can be zoning. You can require a certain amount of any new build to be affordable. That can be the government strengthening its own programs. And it has some, but they're just not capitalized enough with the non-market housing sector. A lot of people, like in Dartmouth, where I am, Dartmouth nonprofit housing, it's now called Rooted. Lots of families for decades have, started out with Dartmouth nonprofit housing. They get a townhouse that they can afford, and then they can move on from there. So there's lots of ways that government can do that. But what we fundamentally need is a recognition that all this new supply that the private sector is building, and of course, the private sector's expenses are going up, and they're companies. They exist to turn a profit, and that's fine. That's what they do. But this government has more responsibility than that. They need to make sure that Nova Scotians have a place to live. And it's really important for our economy because we're losing people. We don't want to lose those young people. We want to be attractive for companies and workers. And all of that is at risk if people can't afford a place to live.
Claudia, one of those expenses for renters in particular, well, for everybody, is on the way up, at least at this point. And that is a proposed power rate increase from Nova Scotia Power at 4.1 next year and 4.1 again in 2027. Your thoughts on A, the power rate increase, and B, the Premier's response to it?
Well, I think, it's been the topic of a lot of conversation. And what most people have said is, are you kidding? Like, are you actually kidding that Nova Scotia Power would be raising the rates again? Those rates have gone up hundreds of dollars since this government came in. People's power bills are going up and up and up, and it's becoming unaffordable. And we know that that's an essential service. So this government needs to do something that actually makes a difference for people. And unfortunately, Tim Houston talks a tough game. He says he's disappointed in the company. But it's like we were just talking about. Like, Nova Scotia Power is a private company. They're trying to make a buck. The government's job is not to be disappointed in the company, but to actually change the laws and the regulations and direct their investment so that people can afford their power. Nova Scotia Power is not a boogeyman. They're a private company that's publicly regulated, that has a monopoly on power in our province. And so, people are rightfully upset, and they're looking for the government to intervene in a way that's going to make sure they can afford their power.
What tools does the Premier have at his disposal to do that, Claudia? I ask that question because I hear from callers who say, well, it's a private company, so he really doesn't have a whole lot he can do about it.
Well, we regulate that company. So we've said for years, there's lots of ways we can look at those regulations. They're a regulated utility. They've just set up a new regulatory body. So there's lots of opportunities. What are the fines if they, don't deliver what they want to? I think one of the reasons people are so upset about the costs going up so much for power is that their power is unreliable. We still get power from coal, and it's more expensive. So, Nova Scotians want power that's affordable and reliable and, as much as possible, green. And we're getting none of the three. Those are all things that we can actually regulate around. We can make sure that there's a way for people who really genuinely can't afford power to be able to keep the lights on, to be able to keep the heat on. And there are ways to look at what does that ownership structure look like. There's a lot of folks who say, well, it shouldn't be a private company that provides this essential service. We've said for years, well, it was a Tory government in the 90s that sold off our public utility for a pittance without doing much research, as the record shows. Maybe we should look into what is the best ownership structure of that company. So I think there's all kinds of ways we can look at how to go forward. But I think in the meantime, there's a lot that this government can do to make sure that people can actually afford their power bills. And I think it's not a nice to have, it's a need to have, because our summers are hotter, our winters are cold as ever. And, we've been in a big push to move off of heating oil, to move off of natural gas even, and to electrify. But you got to keep that electricity on, and people need to be able to afford to do that.
Claudia, we're out of time. Have a fantastic day.
Okay, thanks so much, Dan.
That is Claudia Chender, the leader of Nova Scotia's NDP. We're going to stop, take a break for the news. Blake's going to update us on what's going on the other side of it. Two Halifax residents say the city's mayor is being investigated for an alleged breach of municipal code of conduct rules. The residents say Andy Fillmore made misleading comments when he told the CBC earlier this summer that the chief administrative officer holds the real power at City Hall. Peter Linfield said he filed the complaint because Fillmore doesn't either understand municipal politics or is intentionally misleading the public while pushing for stronger mayoral powers. My question to you is this an offense that is censurable? Should the mayor receive some form of penalty for his comments, or is this just more semantics and more politics? 902-405-6000, 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. The open hour after the news.
Facts.
Welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. It is Thursday. It's time now for the open hour. The lines are open. 902-405-6000. It's 902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. Your opportunity to talk about whatever it is on your mind. That's the beauty of open line radio. A couple of things that piqued my interest in the last 24 hours or so as I prepare for the show. The first one, two residents say that the city's mayor now under investigation for what's being called an alleged breach of the municipal code of conduct rules. The residents say Andy Fillmore made misleading comments when he told the CBC earlier this summer that the chief administrative officer holds the real power at City Hall. Peter Linfield is one of those residents and said he told the Canadian Press that he filed the complaint because Fillmore either doesn't understand municipal politics or is intentionally misleading the public while pushing for stronger mayoral powers. The question to you is, should the mayor be censured? Should the mayor receive some sort of, lack of a better term, punishment for his comments with regards to the CAO? Right after he made those comments, I do remember a number of HRM councillors standing up and saying that is not the case, that the CAO works for Halifax Regional Council. In fact, outside of the Auditor General, I think that the CAO is the only employee of Halifax Regional Council. Everybody else kind of works for the CAO. Kathy O'Toole, or who is soon leaving, and we'll soon see a new one, Brad Anguish. But your thoughts? Should the mayor receive some sort of punishment for this? Should the mayor receive, some kind of penalty for his comments? The CEO's position has been something that's been talked about at length on this program and on many other forums over the years. I think I said at the beginning of the program today, I can remember back as far, maybe all the way back to Andrew Crystal, people talking about that here on this open hour and this open line. Andrew Crystal and Jordy Morgan, and then I know Rick Howe talked about it, and I know Todd Veinotte talked about it, and I've talked about it, that the CAO does have an awful lot of power, an awful lot of discretional spending, and that came to light maybe a year ago, maybe two, when a purchase for Halifax Regional Police of their armored vehicle, as the so-called tank, that was purchased by the CAO that did not go to council, and that raised a lot of specter of wonder about a purchase of that magnitude falling within the purview of the CAO. There's been an awful lot of discussion on this program that staff run the city, and of course that gets disputed, but we talk about it, mayor says it, suddenly that becomes a bit of an issue, and now we're under an investigation. Is this worthy? Is this investigation worthy? Should we dig into this? Or is this just something along the lines of semantics or maybe even politics? 902-405-6000. It's 902-405-6000 is the number. Also piqued my interest today. You just heard it from the leader of the Nova Scotia NDP. The wait list for public housing in this province has reached 8,000 people. That number came to us from June. The wait list growing by 1,200 people in just 8 months as rents have continued to grow faster than the temporary rent cap that the government has put in. Two things here. One, public housing obviously is a discussion point. Should the province get into the wait list or to the public housing field? I think that it should be heavily into the public housing field. It's the only way that we're going to find affordable housing, folks. It really is. The model for housing, particularly at the apartment level here, which is essentially most of what's being built these days, when we rely on a private entity, a private company to provide housing for us, I don't know how you mandate affordable housing onto a private company. You can say it, you can put it into their zoning, you can put it into their development agreement. But as I mentioned to Claudia Chender, and I'll throw this out to you, what's affordable? What a developer on a site and one of these big projects that I'm looking out my window at, his definition of what is affordable and what my definition of affordable is and what your definition of what affordable is are likely two different numbers. If you remember back a couple of weeks ago, we had the folks from Rooted, Dartmouth Co-op Housing, in the studio talking about that. And I have said for years, the model that will work for us to address affordability is to base rent on real life situations, not some fabricated number that somebody pulls out of the air. If we're going to address affordability, if we're going to create affordable houses, it has to be based on somebody's situation. I use myself as an example. I've been in my apartment for, I don't know, a long time, 12 years, 13 years. And just for the sake of study, I started to take a look around HRM, and not just on the peninsula, around HRM as a whole. And for me to get what I have now, what I have for an apartment, rooms, bathrooms, all that stuff, parking, underground, whatever. If I were to leave my apartment today and move down the hall to a similar apartment, I'm making this up, but in my neighborhood for sure, it's $1,000 a month more. $1,000. Now, I don't know about you, but there aren't many families out there that can afford that. What do we do about affordable housing in Nova Scotia? 902-405-6000. It's 902-405-6000. I got off on a tangent, and all of a sudden the phone lines are all full. So keep calling. If you are getting a busy line, we'll get to as much as we can. We'll grab one here very quickly before we move off into our first break, and we welcome Lewis to the program. Lewis, how are you?
Yeah, I'm wonderful, Dan. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
You were talking about Nova Scotia Power there,
Sure.
which brought my memory back. I worked in Burnside for quite a few years, and our building was adjacent to Burnside Drive, so right on the top there.
Yep.
A landmark place, I think, was the buildings we were in or whatever. Anyways, at one point in time, a lot of equipment moved into that big parking lot, and they started digging a 2-foot wide trench and down so many feet or something. Everybody was curious, and so what are we doing here? What are you digging? Putting in natural gas lines. Oh yeah, natural gas lines right through the park. And yeah, I said, where are those going? He said, all right down to the Tufts Cove generating station. They're switching over to natural gas. Well, as I heard later, they found they could sell that gas off to Maine and make a lot more money than using natural gas themselves, and then they went back to burning coal.
Right.
Somebody should get somebody from Nova Scotia Power in to talk to you with for a while or whatever. That's atrocious that they do that. Money ahead of making cheaper electricity for Nova Scotians.
And more environmentally friendly, to be honest.
Absolutely. The coal we get, I think, comes from Venezuela. It's the dirtiest coal in the world, I think. That's just terrible that they're doing that.
Doesn't make much sense.
No.
Lewis,
Anyways,
appreciate the call,
I'll
sir.
I'll leave that with you. See if you can dig something up.
Have a fantastic day. Appreciate your time. 902-405-6000. And by the way, the door is always open. And if they're listening, and I know they are, Nova Scotia Power, anytime, anywhere, you certainly can join the show and we can discuss this at length. Full opportunity to talk to us about power increases and the fuels you use and all of that. We've tried a couple of times. Both times have been turned down. We will continue to try and have Nova Scotia Power appear on the program, but the door is always open. Going to stop and take a break. The open hour continues on the other side. You're listening to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Olstrand. Back in minutes. All right, welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Olstrand. This is the open hour. The telephone number is 902-405-6000. It's 902-405-6000. Let's get right to the phone lines and welcome Jim to the show. Jim, how are you?
Good morning, Dan. How you doing?
Good. Haven't heard your voice in a bit.
Yeah, it's been a while. Been a nice summer. Anyway, Dan, I wanted to address quickly two issues, if I can. You asked a question about the CAO.
Yeah.
And the complaint to the mayor. I think I looked at that administrative order. I'm quite familiar with it. And I don't see where the mayor willfully went out to embarrass the city or do something for his own benefit, but that's only my personal opinion of how I read that particular administrative order. The CAO has been actually fired over the years since I've been around the city. A couple of times they've dismissed the CAO because I think it's the council that basically votes on who they hire as their CAO.
Right.
Officially.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, and they fired a couple in the past, or you might as well say fired, because that's exactly what happened. So I think it's a bit, what would I say? Rick would say outrageous that some of the city councilors could not resolve this issue with the mayor either in private or among themselves, rather than stand up and say, "Oh my God, he's trying to basically screw us in his own way just for his own position." So that's my take on that one. I do have something to ask you as a media person.
Sure.
Over the years, I've dealt with a lot of media, still do. And I can say that what's outraged me this time is, you remember the shootings in Minnesota? I think
Yes.
it was Minnesota, or Minneapolis, was it?
With at the school, at the Catholic school? Yeah.
Yeah, just recently.
Yep.
And I noticed that CNN, and I noticed that indirectly the CBC and some other stations were interviewing children, or at least showing the tapes of the kids being interviewed the very same day that they were victims of the shooting. For example, they interviewed one young little boy that was sitting behind one of his classmates who was shot in the back, and the CNN or somebody on that particular show interviewed the child and asked him how he felt about it when he saw the bullets hit the kid's back. I mean, this is the same day that this happened.
No, I hear you.
And I just wonder, is there a code of conduct or local media? Is that proper or what?
There is a code of conduct, and there are different rules between Canada and the United States. That all being said, we would never interview a child in that situation without express consent from their parent.
Okay, so my question is, if a media person, say from your station or Global or wherever, went to a parent and said, "We want to interview your child," the very same day that they've been, part of a massacre, so to speak, but survived, but you give us permission and we'll still talk to the child. Is that the way it would be interpreted?
Yeah, it would be the same as interviewing a 17-year-old or a 35-year-old or a 45-year-old after. We would never interview a young child without express consent from the parent.
Geez, I don't know, Dan, if that's, do the media ever think of post-traumatic stress with those young children? Most psychiatrists don't encourage that at all.
Well, I would think speaking to anybody that was just a witness to a mass shooting would be subject to post-traumatic stress, not depending on your age. Yeah,
would you like your child to be? Would you like your child to be?
Well, then I wouldn't give the media Jim. I wouldn't give the media permission.
By journalists after they've been involved in a shooting the same day.
I understand your concern, Jim, but as a parent, if it was my kid, I would never let them do it. But that's the parent's prerogative, right?
So the story. But I don't understand the reasons why the media would do that, other than for news. It's news. Aren't they considering the psychological effects of that child that same day that needs to be
again, Jim? I will say that a child of that age, their guardian is responsible for that, and if they give permission, then that's what happens.
Well, with all due respect, Dan, I got to say that's too bad to hear that coming from the media. In Canada especially, I think it's ridiculous. It's terrible. It's an affront to decency to get that child in a safe environment, away from the cameras, away from being questioned. Jesus, I mean, some of those kids are only 8 years old.
Understood.
Where's the moral value behind that?
Did you watch
that kid in front of cameras.
Did you watch it?
Yes, I watched it, and I was upset about it. That's why I'm calling you to complain, to see what the attitude might be for the media here, and I'm not too happy to hear what you got to say.
Jim, I appreciate your call, and I appreciate your opinion. Have a fantastic day.
Yeah, you're welcome.
902-405-6000. It's 902-405-6000. I get it, and it's an absolute per case basis. But I can tell you that anybody within this organization would never interview a 5 or an 8-year-old child at all without getting absolute permission from said person's parents. 902-405-6000. It's 902-405-6000. Let us welcome Doug to the program. Doug, how are you?
I'm doing good, Dan. How are you?
I'm well. What's on your mind?
The stuff concerning Mr. Fillmore, is that really what we want to be squabbling about with the other major issues that plague our city? I believe he may have misspoke, and if he did, then he should be made aware. However, I don't think it's something that, we need to go in and a study has to be created and all of that foolishness. We've got way more to worry about in our city than, a comment that was made erroneously, right? Now, like as far as them saying he broke the municipal code of conduct, I can tell you that I work for a national company, would be one of your competitors, that breaks its own code of business conduct on a daily basis by multiple. It doesn't matter if they're lower end employees or up in the executive ranks. It's being broken daily. So, that's where I'm at, Dan, and I look forward to your thoughts.
Doug, I appreciate your call. Have a fantastic day.
Thank you, sir.
902-405-6000, 902-405-6000. I don't know if the mayor misspoke. I didn't hear the interview, so I'm at a bit of a loss. I don't know if the mayor misspoke. I don't recall, and I stand to be corrected, I don't recall him recanting it. I don't recall him maybe apologizing for it. But I don't know, and I can't speak for the mayor if he misspoke or if he was truly meaning what he said. The only person that can answer that is Andy Fillmore. 902-405-6000. It's 902-405-6000. 1-877-801-8255. That's 1-877-801-8255. The open hour continues after the news. All right, welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. I may have misspoke during the show today and have been corrected by our faithful listeners out there, and am going to set the record straight. I may have alluded that Tufts Cove burns coal. Apparently it does not. It used coal, but now primarily burns natural gas and some oil for power generation. So just to set the record straight, that is, in fact, what I said. So it is in error, and I will correct the record, so to speak. 902-405-6000. It's 902-405-6000. Where are we? Their lines are really busy today. James, how are you?
Hi, fine, thank you. Calling about the Andy Fillmore situation. There is an article on the CBC Nova Scotia website from yesterday that explains all of this in great detail. I'll just be very brief here. So on July 22nd, the mayor was on CBC's Maritime Noon, and there was, he said, quote, that he reports to the chief administrative officer.
Okay.
So he said it, and they actually provide a link to the show so that you can listen yourself.
Okay.
The July 22nd show. So it's true. He said it.
I didn't say it wasn't true. I just didn't hear the interview. That's all I said.
Anyway, so I'm just trying to helpfully give you can listen to it. Just go on the CBC website and click the link, and you can listen to him say it right out of his mouth.
Okay.
So he has not apologized. He went into some mumbo jumbo about how his staff report to the CAO, and that's true, but that's not him. And that's the same as most municipalities. All the staff report to the CAO. Now, if in its wisdom the council thinks the mayor's staff or a couple of them should not report to the CAO, they can make that change. But that's very different from the mayor saying he himself reports to the CAO. So bottom line, whether he was being cute, as in he knows very well he doesn't report to the CAO, but he thought it would be useful to say to emphasize how dissatisfied he is that he doesn't control everything, if I can put it that way. In other words, he's not emperor, or he was in fact ignorant of how the municipal structure works. I don't find either of those very attractive for the mayor of the municipality to be playing that game. If he's ignorant, that's bad, and if he's being disingenuous, I think is the word, that's worse. He's playing on the public's lack of knowledge. Anyway, 2 citizens filed a formal complaint.
Right.
That formal complaint, and this is all in the article online, that complaint has been found. The procedure is that an external investigator is appointed. That external investigator has been appointed. It's someone affiliated with McGinnis Cooper Law Firm. The external investigator has emailed both of the complainants to say that the complaints have merit and will be formally investigated with a formal report back to council by January.
So council decides?
Council decides.
What do you think they're going to do?
Probably just slap his wrist because there's been so much outcry. I mean, they're not going to try to, I don't know what exact power they have.
Feels like that's a lot of procedure and a lot of people involved for council to go behind closed doors and smack them on the wrist and say you don't do it again.
Well, the procedure specified in law.
No, I get it. I'm not arguing that point at all, but it just for something that who knows what he meant, or I'm not going to speak for the mayor, but even if he was disingenuous, I mean, at the end of the day, as a previous caller said, don't we have better things to worry about?
Well, maybe, but it's not great when the mayor, the highest elected official, makes a comment with a straight face on the radio that either he knew was untrue or he didn't know was untrue. I don't know. We've got better things to do. We need housing and et cetera, but we wouldn't be having all this brouhaha if he just had not done that.
Fair point. Thanks, James.
Anyway, thanks.
Have a good one. 902-405-6000. It's 902-405-6000. It just, to me, and my opinion, just feels like the whole thing is a bit full of semantics, right? Like it wasn't, maybe he didn't know, maybe he did know, maybe he was using it to push an agenda for strong mayors, or maybe he didn't. We're never going to know. what's going to happen is council's going to go behind closed doors when they get this report. They're going to say, don't do it again, Mr. Fillmore, and he'll say, okay, and that'll be it. But it just feels like we're using a lot of resources to come down this road. If there's going to be a true code of conduct rule for city council, then shouldn't there be some kind of, I don't know, disciplinary body that looks after it rather than members of council? Take politics out of it. 902-405-6000. 902-405-6000. Where are we here? Let's welcome David to the show. David, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. What's on your mind?
Thanks for taking my call. I totally agree with you. I've been away, just got back from vacation, and listening to the show. And a couple things, Dan, that get me here. 2 citizens step up and bring this forward. So just 2 citizens out of the blue, do they follow council? Do they follow our mayor? Do they follow?
Well, I'm not following the citizens at all, David. David, that's their right. They have this is why this mechanism is here. That's why we have a code of conduct for citizens who have a concern about the conduct of our municipal council, to have a vehicle to have that investigated. I'm not saying that they're not doing what they shouldn't be doing. I just, at the end of the day, councilors are the ones who are going to be the disciplinarians. They're the ones who are going to pass judgment on the mayor.
Exactly. And what I'm thinking is, I don't know, maybe I'm digging somewhere here, Dan, but does it smell fishy? Does it smell like the little clan of council, the Masons of the world and the Clarys of the world? Does it sound like this? Like, I don't know. Am I digging somewhere? It just doesn't.
I hope not, David. And I get it, and I understand where you're going with it, but I truly hope not. But
I think there's a turmoil down there in council. You've been doing the shows. Todd's been away.
Yep.
Bring up some great idea. I like how you had questions about this, and then you brought the person in about the bus, and then so on and so forth. And that's where we go with this.
Right.
This is the show that you have concerns, and you get the people to answer the questions.
We do our best.
So, for sure. So what I like about it is, I'm not starting something here, but I'm just wondering, there's so much turmoil down in that building. They don't get along. There's a little clan. Obviously, he's disliked. You have to see that there's certain councillors that dislike him. Mason's on the top of the list because he got smacked in the mayor election. He got creamed. So now his little clan is, and I'm not saying they went to citizens and said, hey, you know what, let's open this can of worms. But there's more things to worry about in this HRM. Everything to worry about, from shootings to from road conditions, from people living in tents, and this is what council got to waste their time on. This is something that's going to take resources, money, over what? Over something, like you stated, that maybe misspoke or maybe said it the wrong way, whatever. But it's just that I hope you're listening, council, because you know something? You're doing a crappy job. You've been doing a crappy job since you got in there, and I hear it on this show. I hear it from you. I hear it from Todd. And if you do a rating of what kind of performance they have, it isn't very good. And it isn't very good from the people in their areas. The ones that voted for them are saying, holy crap, what did I vote for? It's a mess in City Hall, total mess. And to come back and hear this, it's like, okay, I just drove in a pothole, and I just drove here, and I just drove there, and I see this, and then I hear about this, and this is so small considering all the other problems that we have. So small. Why is this being talked about? Why is this being a priority? And it shouldn't happen. You guys down in council, you guys sitting around that table, start making better decisions and start running the city better, because you're doing a lousy job.
David, appreciate the call, sir.
Thank you.
Have a good one. 902-405-6000, 902-405-6000. Very quickly before we take a break, an email from Rob said, so Fillmore was wrong. He doesn't report to the CEO, but his staff does. Does this really necessitate an investigation and punishment? How about councillors simply correct him, and then we move on to more important things? That from Rob. This one from Roy. It says, Dan, by chance, I did listen to the mayor. He was very deliberate in misleading the CBC listeners. It was his main theme of the interview and made the statement repeatedly. That one from Roy. And this one from Tom, taking exception to something I said. It said, hey, Dan, I agree 100% with Jim for you to defend or justify the media's position on this subject. And that was, of course, the interview of those young children after the shooting shows that the media now lacks some of the same morals that politicians now lack. That one from Tom. Taking a break. Open Hour continues on the other side. You're listening to The Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. We're back in minutes.
Axe.
Welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. This is the Thursday Open Hour. Telephone number is 902-405-6000. It's 902-405-6000. And we welcome Gloria to the program. Gloria, how are you today?
Hi, Todd. Thanks very much. Another beautiful day, Todd.
It's Dan, but that's okay, Gloria.
I'm
let it go.
Sorry. I'm sorry.
No,
I know
fine.
You're Dan.
I have an identity crisis most days.
I know. Maura Ducharme and I used to have that when we were both mayors and both women.
Yes.
So we got that we said, I'm Darren and that's my other brother, Daryl.
There you go. That works for me. What's on your mind today, Gloria?
Anyway, I don't know whether you remember, Dan, whether it was on your show or Todd's. Tony Mancini was being interviewed about the CAO one day, and Tony very clearly said, everybody knows we have one employee.
Right.
I called and corrected him, and he said, yes, I know we have two.
You have the Auditor General and the CEO, right? That's the two?
Yeah.
Okay.
So should I be filing a complaint under the Code of Conduct that he purposely misled, or that all the years he's been over there he doesn't know the difference? No. I have more common sense, Dan. Sometimes when you're giving interviews or making statements, you say things that don't really come out the way they should.
Right.
So I wouldn't be so irresponsible. And I doubt that most of them out there ever knew a code of conduct existed until the day I brought it up, when Sean Clary was being so disrespectful of the public, and that the code of conduct clearly states that they must be respectful to the public. And you have them on there all the time, and you can remember, as I can remember, how many times they've been disrespectful. So any wise person, Dan, knows what's behind this whole thing. I'll leave it at that. The wise people know, and that Mason didn't make it, and they're never going to forget it, and please God that he never does make it. So you have a great day, Dan, not Todd, Dan.
My other brother, Daryl.
Have a great day.
Fantastic, Gloria. 902-405-6000, 902-405-6000. The Code of Conduct, I can think of a couple of different occasions where it was used, but I just wonder if it lacks any kind of real teeth to it. And I know that we're debating, whether or not this should have gone down that road here, but if at the end of the day we're, as I think it was James or somebody that called, said that it goes to a lawyer and a lawyer looks at it, and then it goes for an investigation, which is not cheap, and then that recommendation goes to council, and then, as I mentioned before, it goes behind closed doors and those kind of things. I just, council at the end of the day, what are they going to do? Like, what kind of power do they have? They can't fire them. So, like, is it just semantics? It kind of feels like it, doesn't it? 902-405-6000, 902-405-6000. We welcome Chris to the program. Chris, how are you?
Not bad. How are you, Dan?
Good. What's on your mind today?
Well, a couple things, but I couldn't agree more with Gloria. I can't remember any time in my life that I've known of Gloria that I disagreed with her, so that goes without saying.
Fair.
Your caller previous, David, I hope he's wrong that there isn't this agenda by the clique down at council. I think he's more right than wrong. We'll see how it all pans out and whether there is any penalties or not. But But Gloria is absolutely right about the code of conduct when it comes to Sean Cleary and a couple other councillors down there as well. He in particular breaks that continuously, all the time. You had made a comment about the rent situation if you were to move. And, Dan, it got me thinking that when you really look at the situation, a lot of renters are in the exact same situation you are. But look a little farther than that, you'll find a lot of homeowners are in the same situation. And what I mean by that is that sit down if you're a homeowner listening to this and make up your own conclusions. But if you sit down and look at the home you live in now, especially if you've lived in it for a while like I have mine, if you were to have to go out today at the income that you have today and buy that exact same home, could you afford to do it?
Not likely.
And then, in many, many, many cases, and especially I'll take my own case, I'm semi-retired now. And if I were to go out today on my income today and my life situations today and look at the exact home I'm living in, I couldn't afford to buy it. I couldn't afford to own it. And a lot of homeowners are in that situation. So it's not just renters, it is homeowners as well in many, many cases. You had a caller yesterday, I think his name was Albert, if I'm not mistaken. He made the comment about how water rate increases and electricity cost increases don't affect landlords. Mm-hmm. Well, I spent more than 35 years as a landlord. And Albert, if you're listening, or anybody else for that matter, those costs do affect landlords. But more importantly, they affect tenants as well, because the landlords simply pass along
they won't eat it.
Increases.
Right?
No, well, you can't. You can defer it a little bit, but you can't eat it. And the comment Albert made showed that he really doesn't know anything about the rental business. And I guess maybe if you're not involved in it, you don't. But it's a business like any other business. You generate an income, i.e. your rents. Against that income, there's costs that you incur to generate that income. Interest on your mortgage payments, your electricity costs, utility bills, property taxes, maintenance, repairs, management, et cetera, goes on and on. You offset your income with these various operating expenses. Now, on your interest income, your interest expense, for example, you have a mortgage payment, and it might be $4,000 a month for your mortgage payment. I'm just taking that as an example. You're only allowed to write off, if you want to call it that, or expense out the interest portion of that, not your entire payment.
Right.
A big part of that payment, especially as you get into after your first 5 years of your mortgage, a big part of that payment, the biggest part, is paying back on principal. It's not a write-off. It's not an expensible interest account. So,
Chris, for the sake of time, he also said that landlords are able to write off the water expense. Can you write off a water expense?
Okay, let's you expense it, because it's any cost that you incur as a landlord in the generation of your income, your rental income. Any cost is legally, tax-wise, it's expensible.
Okay.
And these write-offs, people, we throw the term write-offs around. People talk about write-offs as though write-offs mean money in the landlord's or the business person's pocket.
No, it just lowers your taxes, right?
It doesn't. It's a higher expense. If you have a lease that's in effect and you get midway through that lease, you get rent expense increases, you have to eat those until you can raise the rents again at the end of the term of that lease. So you're always playing a catch-up game. And if you want to, he mentioned about washers and dryers, how landlords are not declaring the income on washers and dryers.
Putting in their pockets, yeah.
That's ridiculous. I can't hardly comment on that one. But in the buildings I contracted out the washer and dryers to a company in Burnside that they looked after them, they provided them, they collected all the revenue through tokens or however they did it, and they gave me a percentage. Every month, they gave me a percentage of the income generated. It was a small percent, about 25% of it. But they incurred all of the expense of putting them in there and maintaining them and collecting the revenues out of the machines, emptying them, that sort of thing. And I got a check every month from them. That goes into my business account. I can't put it in my pocket and say it didn't happen. So you do have to, declare all that stuff.
There's a paper trail.
But there's a lot of expenses in running buildings that a lot of people don't realize and understand. And I mentioned quickly about that interest payment. Your mortgage payment is an expense you have to pay out every single month, but it's only the smaller part of the payment, the interest that you're allowed to write off, if you will, against your taxes.
And it's a percentage, right? It's not the whole thing.
No, it's nowhere near the whole thing. So you've got to generate enough income to pay the total principal payment of this mortgage, not just the interest on it. So you can, at the end of the year, you can take what's called capital cost allowance, which is depreciation on your plant or your building and equipment. That's fine. That will help lower your income if you have an income, a taxable income at that point. But when you sell that building, all you're doing is deferring the tax, because when you sell that building, you get what's called recapture of depreciation, and you're paying your income tax on top of all of that you wrote off against on capital cost allowance on your depreciation of your building. The government's getting their money on that. It's just a few years down the road. It's just a deferral process.
Chris, I appreciate you enlightening me on that. It was fantastic. Thank you.
Well, I didn't have a lot of time to do it, and I hope I didn't confuse people more than they are now. But it's maybe you should get someone on that's a little more knowledgeable than me and better with words, and maybe they can explain it better to people. But you do have to understand it. It's a business like any other business.
Chris, have a fantastic day.
Thank you.
And thank you to each and every one of you that picked up the phone, dialed the numbers, and joined the program. My apologies to those of you who didn't get a chance to get on the air. Don't forget tomorrow, Friday free-for-all. Get in early. Avoid disappointment. We're going to stop. Blake is going to update us on what's going on the news. And on the other side, we're going to dig deeper into this Nova Scotia power increase. What does this mean for small and medium-sized business? Duncan Roberson with the Canadian Federation of Independent Business will be here. You're listening to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. We're back in minutes. Welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. Hope you're having a fantastic Thursday as we roll into the afternoon on back-to-school day, as the kids are at their lunch hour now, and we'll be home soon with all of those first day of school tales that everybody looks forward to. We've been focusing a lot here on the program since the news broke earlier this week about this proposed increase in power rates. We know from a residential perspective that it's 4.1 next year and then 4.1 the year after, and if you compound that, ends up being 8.36, whatever the actual number is. Percentage increase. But the only other number that we really have gotten from Nova Scotia Power, at least to this point, is a 2.1% average over their entire customer groups. And I imagine they have a whole whack of different industrial and commercial and light industrial, heavy industrial. Just the list would go on, and then they have power resellers and all of that other stuff. So we don't, at least I don't, know what this impact means for small and medium-sized businesses as they look at another expense that is being thrust upon them at a time when probably they don't need to see any more red ink in their books. Very pleased to welcome into the program. I was kidding with him before he come on the air today that he's here an awful lot these days, and that is from the Canadian Federation of Independent Business is Duncan Roberson. Duncan, how are you?
Thanks for having me. Good to be here. Always stuff to talk about, that's for sure.
Oh, my goodness. Yep. Now, have you heard anything more about sort of what the number is and what this means for business owners?
We're hearing for the commercial, it is 2.1% for the next 2 years.
Right.
We don't know exactly the impact it would have if there are different rates for small businesses, but it would depend, the dollar value in terms of your business, how big you are, how you operate. But if you think of a restaurant or a cafe, your refrigeration has to be open 24/7, your fridge has to be on 24/7. So really electricity is the lifelines for many small businesses, and this is a revenue insensitive cost, which means no matter how well or poorly your business is doing, you're having to pay this bill at the end of the month. So it is going to have an impact, and it's just another additional cost on top of many additional costs, which are having an impact for sure.
And tough to budget for. I mean, from obviously the restaurant model is that you raise your menu price, but we know that menu prices have risen. You can't keep going to that well every time because people just stop buying your stuff, right?
And the big thing here you pointed pointed to rightfully is it's every year there's this ad hoc announcement. We know for the next 2 years, but this is for a 5-year grid reliability plan. So why don't we have the full 5 years? That's a big concern. And when we think of getting to net zero by 2035, small businesses want to see a forecast of rates going up to those years. It doesn't make sense to keep your customers in the dark with this rate increases, and they can't handle ad hoc announcements every year. It has to be plannable, or else, like you said, you're going to have to pass it on to consumers or changing how you're investing in your business. And when you're thinking of the productivity crisis we're facing in Nova Scotia, you don't want to have dollars going out of your business, but that's what's happening, and it's just adding to that overall productivity impact. Yeah.
2.1% doesn't sound like a whole lot, but that can be the difference between red and black numbers on your balance sheet.
And it depends on the amount of power you consume, right? So a business would, I would imagine, consume more than a household. So that rate, percent to percent might not seem a lot, but when you think of the dollar value, it is going to have an impact. There's no doubt. And I heard from a member, we're not looking for costs to go up, we're looking for costs to go down, but that's simply not happening. And I think the Premier rightfully reflected a lot of concerns that Nova Scotians have about this increase. And I know for some small businesses I've spoken to, he very accurately reflected that in terms of the timing and the overall kind of going-ons of Nova Scotia Power. And then, consumers, small businesses just need a break, really. And to see these ad hoc announcements every year, 2% here, 2% there, it's going to be an overall, compounding cost. And again, just give us the 5 years. Why only hold it on the 2 years? We need some certainty on this.
And in Halifax, not only are they looking at a power rate increase, but we're looking at a 36% or 37% increase in water rates too. This is yet another expense that businesses are going to have to pass on to the customer.
And it's another, again, revenue insensitive cost. And I've reached out to Halifax Water to see what that percent will be for commercial small businesses. We haven't heard exactly what it will be yet, but either way, it's an impact, and rightfully so. Looking at consumers, when they see these added costs, there's a cost of living crisis for sure. That means less disposable income. That means less spending at small businesses, unfortunately. And on the, like you said, on the small business side, many can't absorb these added costs and have no other choice to increase their prices. That's not the first thing they want to do. That's the last thing they want to do. So it just creates a very difficult economy. And when you're trying to compete against big box stores for where these increases are, peanuts to them, it just makes it that much more difficult to compete.
Another interesting thing I found in digging into this a little bit, there was a focus group that Nova Scotia Power met with a bunch of different organizations, the Consumer Advocate and a bunch of different things. I didn't see any business interest in there, or at least from the small business world. I imagine the big industrial producers probably have a say in it because they use way more power than everybody else. But do you find that a little bit frustrating that small business owners don't get a seat at the table when it comes to these things?
Well, they do, and I think government deserves credit. There is a small business advocate who does speak to issues, but we don't know the exact result of the discussions. We won't know until it hits the UARB, so we can't really comment on the discussions that have been had. Right. Of course, there's a balance between affordability and et cetera, but thinking of Nova Scotia Power, there's also that 9% return on investment they need to get on the overall agreement, which is, of course, is a concern. I think maybe some more competition in that sphere, maybe some additional providers might be able to help some costs. Who knows? But I think that's definitely one step. There's, of course, discussions on nationalizing or provincializing Nova Scotia Power. I don't think the answer. We need to go the other way. More competition in that sphere to ensure that there is that incentive to provide lower costs and productivity enhancements and things like that. I think that's something to consider.
What would you like to see happen with this, Duncan? The Premier has said that Nova Scotia Power is out of touch. He's not happy with the whole thing. All of the political leaders, we talked to Claudia Chender earlier today, said not happy with it. I know the Liberals aren't happy with it. Most people aren't happy with it. What would you like to see happen here, if anything? Mm-hmm.
Operating in the environment we are now, I think the quick answer would be to, again, provide that clear forecast of rates for consumers and small businesses. If you're a small business and you want to succeed, it's predicated on being able to, look down the line 5-10 years. And again, if we're just seeing these ad hoc increases, it doesn't make sense. And again, when this is a 5-year plan and you're only showing the first 2 years, why is that, and why aren't you showing the full picture? I think small businesses need to know to be able to decide how they invest in their business, staffing levels, et cetera. So many things go into operating a small business, and you need to see into the future, and it just doesn't make sense to only see 2 years in front of you.
Very quickly, we're almost out of time. It's September. It's in Halifax. It's back to school. The university students are back in town. It gets to be a busy time of the year. How optimistic are your members? What are they telling you looking forward into the fall, and then, of course, the Christmas season?
Yeah, when we look at our monthly business barometer, we measure short-term and long-term confidence. That's in the next 3 and 12 months.
Right.
And in both of those, we're seeing some quite low levels. So more businesses pessimistic than optimistic. Lower, particularly in the long term, than we would have seen during the pandemic, which is a concern. But I think there's a real opportunity. You said, people are getting back to work, kids are getting back to school, MLAs are getting back to the legislature. I think they need
Finally.
Exactly. We don't know how long. It might be only a couple of weeks. You never know.
Let's hope.
Yeah, but they need to really focus on creating economic certainty and providing that for small businesses. That needs to be one of the main conversations this fall.
How about hiring? I know there's a lot of university students looking for work.
Yeah, well, it's a difficult market, but we are seeing many small businesses still saying that shortage of skilled labor is a concern. I think it's around 4 in 10 here in Nova Scotia. So again, that is a focus. We want to ensure that we're matching, skills, et cetera. I know there's some focuses at the provincial level, more opportunities for skilled trades. We want to see, exactly how successful that has been. We'd like to see some data on that as well. But there's lots to do in the fall, and we hope that we're seeing government really step in and fill these gaps.
Duncan, is always a pleasure, sir.
Anytime. Thank you.
That is Duncan Roberson with the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. Coming up after the break, I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story about me and getting perhaps involved into a little bit of cycling. We talk about bikes. We talk about bike lanes a lot on the program. So I thought, hey, maybe I should get a bicycle. Maybe I should get out on the road and see if Councillor Cleary is correct in saying that there are thousands of people out on those bikes every day, because the only way apparently that I'm going to know that is if I get out and do it. But as I started to do my research on this, I started to look at biking and biking infrastructure and getting around on a bike, getting to and from work here at Young Tower and from my residence in Clayton Park. And the whole thing is very confusing. It really isn't, for an outsider looking in, not easy. But there's a new app that is looking to change all of that. We're going to welcome into the studio after the break the chair of the Cycling Guide Foundation. David Trueman is here. He's going to try and enlighten me a bit about some of the big, scary things out there when it comes to finding your way around on a bicycle. That's coming up next. You're listening to The Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. Back in minutes. All right, welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. As I mentioned before the break, I'm in the process of getting myself involved in cycling, at least from a part-time perspective, I'll say, to just get out there and experience it for myself, because I think that's kind of appropriate considering how much time that we spend talking about cycling and bike lanes and those kind of things here on this program. So in preparation for that, I thought, well, if I get a bike, maybe I can ride to work. That's something that people talk about. And then I'm like, okay, well, how do I do that? Because I just drive. I don't ride bicycles. And I know there's a couple of bike lanes on the way, but I don't know how they get to them. And I know that there's still some issues with connectivity with our bike lanes. But so I went on the HRM site, and they have a bike map there. But it, to be honest, left a lot to be desired. And I'm like, well, I'm more confused now than I was before. And then this came across my desk, and I was very happy to see that somebody, an organization, has stepped up and have created an app to take some of the scary stuff, maybe is the right way to describe that, out of cycling here in Halifax. The chair of the Cycling Guide Foundation, David Trueman, is in the studio with me today, and I guess the very first question is, well, welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you, Dan.
I guess the very first question is the genesis of this app. Why did you decide that we needed one of these?
Well, we started out, I think it was 4 years ago. At the time, I was living in Waterloo, Ontario, although I started out in Halifax many years ago. And frankly, we were just frustrated with the paper maps and, other apps, dumping you into horrible, busy streets that were quite frankly dangerous. So we thought we could do better.
Right. And as I was looking at that map, the HRM map, I live in Clayton Park and I work at Yonge and Roby, and Bears Road is crazy busy, and Roby Street is crazy busy, and I'm looking at these things, and some have lanes, some don't. This thing lays it all out for me, does it not?
Well, exactly. It is primarily targeted at the folks, about 60% of the population, who would like to ride more but need some support and to become more comfortable. And what it does is, you just put in where you want to go, defaults to where you are currently, and it will give you a route to that destination using the lowest stress route segments that it can find. So every street, every little trail, every connector is classified by traffic stress, and we try to find that route that will get you there safely with confidence.
So this thing's not going to dump me in the middle of Bears Road or Roby Street and all that traffic?
Absolutely not. And even better, it lets you know in advance what you're going to be encountering, because every route it produces is color-coded. So if it's all green, you know it's going to be low stress the whole way. If it has green and blue, well, blue are quiet residential streets. You're going to be okay on that too. If it has some amber or some magenta, then you've got a heads up, that there's something here you might be cautious about.
Extra cup of coffee before going out on it.
Yeah.
Fair enough. So how long does it take to develop something like this, David? Like, I imagine there's all kinds of, I know that HRM does provide open data points and you're able to get that, but it must be quite a project to put this together and then test it.
Yeah, well, we've been at it for a few years, and of course it keeps getting better, and we're launching it, this year in Halifax, and it started out in Waterloo. We also launched it in Ottawa this year, but we still have lots of things we want to do to improve it. For example, currently, very important to Halifax, we don't take into account the steepness of the hills.
Right.
And we want to add that. Hopefully we'll have that in by next year. But it's all based on OpenStreetMaps, which is like the Wikipedia of the mapping world.
Okay.
So all the data we get from those maps, and the beauty of that is that I'm an OpenStreetMap editor. So whenever we find something that's not quite right on the map, I can fix it within 24 hours.
Right. So does it primarily try? And I know, as I mentioned in my preamble, that there are still a number of issues with connectivity with bike lanes here, but does it try to guide people into the bike lane network, which I would imagine would be the lowest stress of the stress on the road?
Yes, absolutely. Any protected bike lane or off-road trail is going to be level 1, and that's where green on the maps. So we'll try to use that as much as possible. And where we can't find connections with all level green, then we'll use quiet residential roads to connect them up. And only, if we really can't find anything, then you might get some amber connectors.
So obviously when you go through this data, and then these routes are tested, you've had people out on bikes to prove that they work, correct?
Yeah, so, it doesn't have defined routes in the app.
Right.
It figures them out on the fly.
Right.
So we can't test every single route, but we have had the app in beta testing for about 4 or 5 months this spring. So people who are familiar with Halifax have given it a run, and I've had to correct some things to make it the best possible routes.
So is it designed for it to be riding or working while you're riding, or is it something you look at beforehand and then put your phone in your pocket, or is it a combination of both?
It's both. You can use it just beforehand, but it does have a cycling mode. So if you can mount your phone on the handlebars, it'll keep...
Which I see a lot.
Yeah, it'll keep the route oriented the way you're traveling.
Just like your car.
Yeah. In the future, we will have turn-by-turn and audio instructions, but we're not there yet.
So you can get a mount for your handlebars, put your phone on there to look just like your car, and do the same thing.
Yeah, exactly.
So I guess the most important question people are asking right now is where do I get this?
Yeah, you just go to cyclingguide.org, cyclingguide.org, and there's a download link there, and you can get it for your Apple or your Android phone. It's free. It will always be free. You don't even have to sign up and make an account because it's all privacy oriented.
Right. So just get on there, get it done, and cycle and with a little less stress.
Yep. And right in the app, you can send us feedback. If you find something that's not optimal, just send us a note.
Well, I'm glad that this finally exists, and I wish you all success moving forward.
Okay, thanks, Dan.
That is David Trueman, the chair of Cycling Guide Foundation, the new app available where you get your apps, and I hope that you look forward to trying it out. I know I do. We're going to stop for the news. Blake is going to update us on what's going on. On the other side of it, a conversation with Halifax Senior Manager of Communications Corporate Strategy with Halifax Water. The water restrictions are still being, the voluntary water restrictions are still being asked for us to use, for lack of a better, that's bad English, but they're asking us to conserve water. We're going to see how that's going, what it means, and how long we are going to be under these voluntary restrictions as we deal with these drought conditions. You're listening to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. You're back in minutes.
Corporate megastores are spending millions lobbying D.C. politicians on one-sided policies that send small businesses tumbling. They want to enact harmful credit card mandates that take resources away from your local credit union and community bank, leaving Main Street businesses with less access to credit, making it harder for your family to pay for everyday goods like gas and groceries. Tell Congress to guard your card and oppose the Durbin-Marshall credit card mandates.
Paid for by Electronic Payments Coalition.
All right, welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. It's been about a month now that we have been asked to be mindful of what we're using when it comes to water with the ongoing situation in the wildfire situation, of course, and with the ongoing drought situation in the province, and looking at the forecast, a continued lack of rain. It is the water restrictions, or the voluntary water restrictions, remain in effect. To tell us a little bit about this and what it means and what kind of impact that we're having, we're very pleased to welcome to the show, to give us a little perspective on the whole thing, the Senior Manager of Communications and Corporate Strategy for Halifax Water, Jeff Myrick. Jeff, how are you?
I'm good, Dan. How are you?
I am well, sir. I guess let's start there. We know that these restrictions have been on for about a month now. Are we having an impact? Is it noticeable?
So unfortunately, from a consumption point of view, we haven't seen a significant drop-off in consumption that would help us conserve water. And there's a few factors that may be at play there, just the amount of heat and the amount of people that are home over the summer months. That could be driving up consumption. But right now we haven't seen a drop in consumption. And unfortunately, we have not seen a large amount of rain, as everyone across the province would be able to acknowledge. And except for the scatter drop of rain we had over the last couple of weekends, that's the only thing that's helped us with where we are in terms of the water levels.
Jeff, how dire is the situation at the reserves? Are we getting into critical areas?
So the good news is that Pockwalk Lake is still within the normal range. It's still dropping, of course, because of just how dry it is. But where we are really starting to go from what we deem the watch phase into the warning phase is at Lake Major. And that's more specifically related to a technical design issue, which we ran into last year during the drought as well, where the intake from the pump house isn't deep enough in the lake. It was designed to be at a certain level, and if with drought conditions, it doesn't really work that well. So we will need to come up with an alternative pumping solution in order to keep the water service to our customers.
Jeff, as I understand it, and I stand to be corrected, was there not a dam issue there as well, and some work that had to be done there to help with that situation?
Well, so the dam was addressed a few years ago. It is a relatively new dam. It's the issue is the intake itself, and so I would draw the analogy of you have a pretty significant large cup of water, and your straw that you're trying to suck the water out with is only going down so far. And once you get to half full, you're not getting any more water. So you need to be able to stick the straw down deeper. And so ultimately, that's the alternative pumping solution that we will have to come up with if the water level keeps dropping.
Is that an involved process? And the reason why I asked that, Jeff, is that this problem was identified last year as well, and we went into some restrictions as a result of it. Is the engineering work underway, or is it where are we at with it?
Yeah, so there's two parts to this. The alternative pumping solution is a temporary solution that we would use to get us through this type of drought scenario. The longer term address for this is it does take time. We are in the design phase of coming up with what that looks like. It's a pretty intensive job in terms of the amount of work that will have to be done in basically a water reserve or watershed area that is protected, but also needs to keep servicing over 100,000 customers. So we're trying to plan it out in a way that it doesn't undermine the service that we have to provide on a daily basis.
Jeff, I'm looking at the forecast. I'm not seeing anything really significant, at least in the next 7 to 10 days, with Lake Major being in the state that it's in. Is there, or are we going to see that temporary or the voluntary restrictions switch to mandatory, or is it too soon to say?
It's let's hope for rain. I think that's the quick question, quick answer. If we keep going the way we're going, we are going to be moving into mandatory restrictions, and that will mean that some of the things that we've been asking our customers to do as voluntary measures now will become mandatory, of course, and with that will become more stringent in terms of ensuring compliance.
When we have restrictions, voluntary restrictions, or in worst case, mandatory restrictions, obviously we as residents understand, the whole flushing the toilet and doing full loads of laundry and dishwashers and those kind of things. What kind of restrictions get put upon large water consumers in the commercial world or in the industrial world? Do they fall under the same restrictions that we would?
Well, so it varies depending on what stage of mandatory we'll go in.
Right.
The first stage will probably be just a reflection of what we've been asking people to do in voluntary. But if this keeps getting worse, and hopefully it doesn't, and we start getting more rain, then those hard questions that you're getting at will need to be answered. And right now, as part of our plan, that's not part of the initial mandatory phase, but will be drawn upon if it's required.
So, bottom line is Jeff, to do what you can as a consumer. What are the best things we can do, best practices as consumers to conserve water?
So to put it in perspective, we've got on an average day, one person uses 215 liters of water a day. So any small things that we can do to reduce the water, whether it's not flushing as much as we do, if it's cutting your showers short by a couple of minutes, not using the tap when you're brushing your teeth, fixing leaky faucets and any connections, full loads of laundry, of course. All of that adds into conserving water. It doesn't sound like a lot when it's on an individual basis, but collectively we can make a difference. And of course, try to limit the activities like watering lawns and washing vehicles and filling pools and stuff like that. But we are getting to a point where this is getting a bit more concerning when it comes to where the lake water level is, and anything our customers can do to help, we really appreciate it.
Jeff, appreciate your time.
All right. Thanks a lot, Dan. Take care.
That is Jeff Myrick from Halifax Water. It looks like the Pockwalk Lake is going to be okay. I mean, I'm putting quotes around that. If this drought gets persistent, then there may be issues there. But as has been the tradition here in HRM as of late. Lake Major water supply, there's, I think he said 100,000 people that are on that water supply, is in danger of moving from this voluntary restriction to a mandatory restriction. We hope that doesn't happen. We've been through this before. I can remember, I think it was last year, maybe it was the year before, where we had mandatory restrictions on because of that intake hose, or hose is probably not the right term, but because of the intake at Lake Major. Hopefully we'll get some rain. Hopefully this won't happen. But if you've been out, now that you're able to get out into the woods and walk some rivers and some ponds and some streams, you can tell that it is extremely dry out there. Took a walk around Belcher's Marsh in Clayton Park, and it's pretty low. And I would imagine that many of the lakes and rivers and streams in our part of the world are low, and I think we can appreciate why these voluntary restrictions on, although it doesn't seem, at least to this point, that many people are heeding the advice, I should say, of Halifax Water, and hopefully the rain comes before we need to take any more drastic steps, because when we get to these mandatory things, I know it becomes a problem for many. We're going to stop and take a break. When we come back, the Atlantic International Film Festival is right around the corner. It's not that far off now. And one of the films that is premiering at the festival on the 13th is a film called Dancing on the Elephant. Kevin Kincaid plays Kenny in that film, and he's on the phone and will join us after the break. You are listening to The Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. We're back in minutes.
Thanks.
If you look at the schedule for the Atlantic International Film Festival, there are films and documentaries and such coming from all over the world of this thing, right? It is becoming a major event, and it is a fantastic showcase for these films. But, well, I look forward to when the Atlantic International Film Festival hits the theaters, Park Lane here in Halifax next week. Next week already. Look at that. The 12th, I think, is when this film, next Friday, will release. Is the ones that have a little bit of, I want to say, local content, some Nova Scotia content, perhaps. And one of the films that has all of that and some fairly big names, biggest names that there are in Canada, let's say. Dancing on the Elephant, it's called. It's a Nova Scotia-made feature film, and it stars Amanda Brugel and Sheila McCarthy, who is probably, if not one of the most decorated Canadian actors around, and of course, Mary Walsh, who we all know will be starring in this film as well, and a whole bunch of other well-known actors, including one that joins me on the phone right now, and I'm very pleased to welcome Kevin Kincaid to the show. Kevin, how are you?
Yeah, doing great, Dan. Thanks for having me.
So this is a film that kind of centers around a retirement home and the fun and frivolity and the hijinks that happens there. Tell me that this was an extremely fun piece to make.
Yeah, first of all, it's Saturday at 4:45 p.m. in the afternoon.
Sorry,
that's when
got
it airs.
Yep.
Yeah, no worries. I loved your introduction, by the way. You gave a fantastic sort of breakdown of, what made this film so fun to be on was working with two icons.
Right.
Sheila McCarthy and Mary Walsh. I mean, it was, for me, unbelievable. Just there's one scene where I was sitting in the truck with the two of them, and I just looking over like, how did this happen? And Mary Walsh, she's such a fantastic actor, always talking. Then action, she goes into her character, cut, she's back talking again, And Sheila was more the opposite. She's very quiet, very reserved, but very present. And it was probably, it was one of the highlights of my career right now is we're getting to work with those two icons. Now, was this shot entirely in Nova Scotia? Yeah, it's all in Nova Scotia. It's set in Cape Breton. It's set. I laughed because I was just down in Cape Breton last week shooting a commercial. Yeah, it's shot in Cape Breton, but we shoot it all in Nova Scotia on the mainland, more around Halifax, St. Lawrence there. St. Lawrence Beach, Lawrencetown Beach, sorry. Yep. down around that area. So we didn't actually go down to Cape Breton, but my character actually has a Cape Breton accent because he's a lobster fisherman, and he's really struggling with putting his mother into a home, and doesn't really know how to communicate that sort of stuff. So, and then she gets into the home, and she doesn't want to be there. She's had a stroke. She's lost her license. It's kind of why she has to be there,
right?
Because there's really nobody to take care of her, right? And this sounds unfun, obviously, right? But this is the sort of journey that she has when she meets, Mary Walsh's character. Sheila McCarthy and Mary Walsh meet on screen in an old age home, and it's just where it goes from there. The humor, the level of seriousness, it's just that's what made this fun to work on. Is you're working with people that really knew what they were doing and knew how to handle this.
This film
type of topic.
It certainly is very topical, right? I mean, this is what families deal with pretty much every day.
Yes. This is why it's so important to talk about this. Is really so many people. I think in the Maritimes, I can't speak for the rest of the globe, but in the Maritimes for sure, so many of us are going through this. Like that, we've had to put our parents in the home, or we're about to, or how do we deal with those conversations of, putting them into the home and getting the best care for them. The funniest thing is, I was out with a friend last night. We were for a walk, and in 2000, I started producing and I started acting. The two things. I act because I love to walk in other people's shoes, and I produce because I want to get my friends' work up and going and get it created. So I did this play called The Best, and it was all about a man who had to come to terms with putting his wife into a home. Okay. Now cut to 25, 26 years later, I'm actually in a film that's about the same material,
right? About
putting your mom into a home. It's still going on, And the funny thing is that guy's play that I put up, he helped me with the Cape Breton accent. His name's Jared McLean. So he gave me the Glace Bay accent for me to work on. And I think we nailed it and did a great job. So it's so funny how the art has gone so far, and then how this topic is still happening. It's still, trying to find levities to such an awful situation.
Kevin, this is premiering at the Atlantic International Film Festival on Saturday. How important are festivals like this one for these kind of films to get that wide exposure?
Well, I guess it's always one. Do you want to wait till the film's released and then put the people in the seats, or do you want to get the film festival, the marketing that comes from that? I definitely think it's huge to actually get to a film festival and be able to talk to other filmmakers, people in the business, and then get it out to the public that's kind of interested in it, and to show the world premiere, And I think there's a real importance to having that, just to raise awareness, to get that energy going, and to get people, back into the cinemas.
Right, and to see some homegrown talent, because we often talk about the film industry here, but to be able to experience the finished product in Halifax at Park Lane, that's fantastic.
Yeah, well, the hometown win, right?
Right.
I won for Best Feature for a film that I produced through Screen Nova Scotia in the first year that it was happening. And that was kind of the one moment of my career where I was like, yes, it's nice to be recognized by your hometown. And that's the best place to celebrate it. Funny enough, the two directors are from the States, Julia and Jacob. And for them to have found Walter and Tanya, and to bring it to Nova Scotia to tell this story, it's been amazing to have them on that journey. To have those fresh eyes of seeing how to portray Nova Scotia,
Right, absolutely. Kevin, we're almost out of time, so give us the rundown, when and where, and what we can expect.
Yeah, it's at the Atlantic Film Festival, Park Lane Cinemas, 4:45 p.m. on Saturday. I think it's Theater 4. You jump on the website, you click on it, Dancing on the Elephant, you'll find it. And it's meeting two icons and seeing two iconic Canadian actors go at it. And I think that you summed it up the best when you first mentioned this. I really appreciate that, Dan.
All right, Kevin, I appreciate you and appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. You have a great day.
That is Kevin Kincaid. He is in the film Dancing on the Elephant, which will star Sheila McCarthy, Mary Walsh. It doesn't get much better than that. And being that it's set here in Nova Scotia, just drives home the point, right? It's one of those ones, I think, as you're going through that list of the film festival, and there is a lot at the film festival, this is one of the ones that I have highlighted and circled and asterisked to make sure that I don't miss. So that will be at the Park Lane Theaters on Saturday. So that on the 12th. My mistake, the 13th. Then let's make sure we see you all there. That's going to about do it here for the program. Thank you to each and every one of you who took time out of your day to join the show and impart your knowledge on us. It makes my day when you do that, and I learned so much. Thank you to each and every one of you who dialed the numbers and joined the open hour and shared your thoughts, both on the radio and on the email. I learned from you as well, and it makes for fantastic radio. Would be remiss if we didn't thank Vanessa Vandenez on the other side of the glass for keeping things in order, for keeping me in line, and keeping the socials flying, and keeping the show going down the path. Sometimes we fall off it, but most times Vanessa keeps it going. She does a fantastic job. Doesn't get near enough recognition for what she does. She is great, and she's the driving force behind the Todd Veinotte Show. Tomorrow, everybody, is Friday. It'll be the fantastic, fabulous Friday edition of the program. We're going to connect up with the Atlantic Chamber of Commerce to talk about growth strategies here in our part of the world. We'll dig into the workforce issues that Duncan earlier in the show told us about, so I hope that you can stick around for that. Alistair will be here with your weekend weather. Cecil will be here with sports. The NFL kicks off tonight. Can you believe it? It's already here. And we'll tee up that big Blue Jays series against the Yankees this weekend. I know that Cecil's a Red Sox fan. We can't help that. But it is going to be huge for the Blue Jays, let me tell you, because they're 3.5 up on the Yankees, and this could be make or break for the Blue Jays. So you'll catch all of the action right here. Cecil will be here to join us. Tim Powers will be here tomorrow. There will be lots of things to talk about. I hope that you can spend some time with us. Thanks for joining us today, everybody. Appreciate your time. Be well and be kind to one another.